Let's see if my mic, there we go. Good evening and welcome to our November Committee of the Whole meeting. We're glad you're here with us today. The Board of Trustees of Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District is now convened in the Committee of the Whole meeting on Thursday, November 9th, 2017, in the boardroom of the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District Instructional Support Center, 10300 Jones Road, Houston, Texas, at 6 p.m. We're going to receive the portion of the agenda. We're going to review the agenda of November 13th's meeting and designate additional items to be on, well, let me read this the correct way. I got off track, I'm sorry. We're going to look at our school board agenda designated as action items and to hear designated reports and recognitions posted in the meeting notice as required by Texas law. We do not take action at this meeting. I want to welcome the members of our audience and our television viewers to this meeting of the Board of Trustees. As the Cypress-Fairbanks Board of Trustees, we are here to set goals, listen to reports, approve budgets, contracts, personnel appointments, and make policy for the district. It is not the role of the board to make day-to-day operational decisions. The management and day-to-day operations of the district are the responsibility of the superintendent. We have policies and procedures in place to resolve any concerns and issues. This is a public meeting of the Board of Trustees, not a meeting of the public. Prior to this meeting, board members received information related to items on tonight's agenda. Agenda items will not necessarily be handled in the order listed on the notice. The meeting is open to all who wish to attend and hear the matters discussed. During the course of this meeting, the board may determine that a closed session is necessary. In that event, the board will meet in closed session to consider matters duly posted for this meeting as permitted by sections 551.071 through 551.084 of the Texas Government Code. These proceedings are airing live on CFTV Channel 16 and CFTV online on the district website. They will also be rebroadcast throughout the month on Channel 16 and available as video on demand on the website. For the tape to adequately reflect the proceedings, I respectfully ask that you please refrain from talking while others are speaking and that cell phones are turned off or are in the silent mode. Thanks for taking the time to join us this evening and for your interest in the Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District. Do I have any members of the Community Leadership Council Committee with us today? All right. Any Boy Scouts? I don't see any. All right. We're going to review and discuss the following action items. 4 action items consensus. The board will consider approving the tax refunds of $500 or greater for Cypress-Fairbanks ISD. And B, the board will consider approving the minutes of the October 12, 2017 regular meeting. Are either of those items need to be moved off consensus, everyone? We're good with those. Looking at our action items that are non-consensus, starting with 5A, the board will consider approving bids and contracts and/or authorizing purchase orders as recommended in the posted agenda item. Are there any questions on 1A, Activity Fund Software Site License and Maintenance Fee Renewal, 2, Audiovisual and Theatrical Equipment and Supplies, Automotive Fuels is number 3, and 4 is Demographic Services. Number 5 is removed from the agenda. Number 6, Music Supplies. That brings us to the end of item A, 1 through 6. Any questions on those items? Mr. Jackson?
Will number 5 come back and visit us in the future? Do we know?
You know, I'm not sure about that. I haven't heard.
We expect to bring that back to the board at the December meeting.
Right. Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Any other questions on those items? Mr. Covey?
Yes, on the number 4, the demographic services, this is the same company we've used the past few years, is that correct? And they're doing a reevaluation, looking at everything that we've got once again for us, right?
Correct.
What are we looking at? Oh.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, that's it. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Any other questions? Could that item go to consensus, ladies and gentlemen? Mr. Jackson? Okay, good. B, the board will consider approving the budget amendments for the period of July 1st, 2017 through September 30th, 2017. Do we have any questions for either Mr. Snow or Ms. Smith on this item? Mr. Jackson?
Stuart, if you would remind all of us what item, let's see, that's Fund 224 Idea Part B formula relates to?
The IDEA Part B formula is the federal grant money that we receive for our students in special education program, excuse me.
And was that a increase or a decrease to the budget?
We actually don't budget for that. What we do is, as the awards are provided to us by the government, we book the amount of the awards as they come in. It's a net zero transaction, basically, in the financial statements. We book the revenue and the expenditures equally.
And we track how we spend those dollars too,
Absolutely,
correct?
yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ladies and gentlemen, could that item go to consensus? All right, great. All right, we are going to have a brief presentation on the next item. C, the board will consider approving the district's 2017 comprehensive annual financial report and accept the auditor's report on the district's general purpose financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2017. Mr. Snow?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Henry. As you know, the Texas Education Code requires an annual audit of our district's financial statements, and that audit report be approved by the board within 150 days of the end of the fiscal year. Our independent auditors, Weaver and Tidwell, have completed its audit of our financial statements and have issued its independent auditor's report on those financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2017. They've also rendered their opinion report on the federal financial programs in the single audit report that you also have a copy of. However, before we present the comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year 2017, I want to recognize a number of our accounting staff, our financial services staff, particularly Karen Smith, Mabel Isles, Melissa McInerney, and Annette Pete, and the rest of the finance department. They just do an incredible job, incredible work on working with the auditors and preparing this pretty comprehensive report that's 152 pages long, and working with the auditors in developing the audit schedules that they provide the auditors. Every year, our CAFR wins awards from the Government Finance Officers Association, as well as the Association of School Business Officials, and I have almost nothing to do with this, so I just want to commend them for their fine work and their diligence in preparing this report.
Are they here tonight?
I believe, I don't know. Mabel is here, yes. Stand up, Mabel. Also, you have a copy of that report at your place on the dais, and you see that the cover of that report is very professionally well done, very beautiful, and I want to recognize Austin Dunson for his work and his team for designing that cover. Also, Deborah Kirkham and Greg Peterson with the auditors are here tonight to present the firm's audit opinion and the single audit reports. and I'll give them an opportunity within a few minutes to do that. But at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Karen Smith to make a presentation on the overall general fund year-end financial statements.
Thank you, Mr. Snow.
Snow. And before I get started, I just want to piggyback off of something Mr. Snow indicated. Mabel Isles and her team just did an amazing job this year, more than ever, because if you recall, we had the hurricane, and it actually occurred while the auditors were here doing their testing. And Mabel Isles and her team, as well as our auditors, got us back on schedule because we have a legal deadline to present this to TEA by November 27th. So I would just want to commend them for getting that accomplished. And so I'm here to present to you the district's results that are shown in the comprehensive annual financial report. And as you know, the general fund is the district's main operating fund. And the district reported as of June 30th, 2017, total revenues of $886.9 million, and then expenditures of $862 million, which resulted in an excess of revenues over expenditures of $24.9 million. Then added to that, that is included in the net change in fund balance, is the sale of property, which relates to the auctions that the district has when they sell property that is no longer useful for the district, and then also the transfers in. And that what that represents is any profit that we see because of the community programs program, which is the Club Rewind and the summer programs. That is reflective there, and we bring it into the general fund. This resulted in an ending fund balance of $427.5 million. And some of the highlights related to our reporting for June 30th, 2017 is that we had an increase in fund balance of $25.7 million. The district's total fund balance represents about 6 months worth of expenditures, which is 181 days. If you actually look at the district's unassigned fund balance, it's a little less than that. It's about 171 days, but we have a very healthy fund balance. Also, if you turn to page 32, you will actually see the general administration amount in the revenues over expenditures, and it represents only 1.8% of the district's total expenditures, which is less than the 3% average of the state. Also, in looking at the district's financials for June 30, 2017, the administrative cost ratio is about 3.76%, which is well below the recommended amount that's ideal for districts that have an average daily attendance of 10,000 students or more, which is 8.55%. Also, before I turn it over to Debbie Kirkham, I wanted to draw to your attention that's actually on, I believe it's page 30 in the financial statements. Let's see, page 28, I'm sorry. You will see that we assigned $18.2 million of our fund balance to offset the budget deficit that we brought to the board for 2017-18. This is just a precautionary where we have reserved the fund balance, and that was brought to you when we presented the budget back in June. And I'm going to turn it over to Debbie Kirkham to go over the audit report as well as to go over the report on our single audit, and then she and I both will be here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Glad to be here tonight to present to you the results of our audit. Our audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and the government auditing standards that were issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. And as you can see in the PowerPoint, the summary of the auditor's result was on the financial statements was a clean, unmodified opinion. It's the highest level of assurance that you can receive that the financial statements are fairly stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Also on page 9 in the summary of auditor's results of the federal single audit report, which is that thinner report that you have, is The federal programs that we audited this year were the Child Nutrition Cluster. They were the major program, and they also received an unmodified clean opinion. There were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies or non-compliance as it relates to the financial statements or as it related to the Child Nutrition Cluster. And I just want to piggyback off of what Karen and Stuart has said. I know as auditors, we come in and we ask for a lot of information at an interim time when we come in, and we spend a lot of time testing transactions in the summer, and then we come back in the fall or in August for your particular district and follow up on that incremental amount of transactions and reviewing all of the reconciliations. And sometimes when we think of a governmental, we think of one fund and all the numerous funds that are in there. We just want to compliment them because they're ready for us when we come through the door. They've already uploaded a lot of information to the portal, and we're just here collaborating all of that information with staff and with their documentation, and we appreciate each of them and the courtesies they extend to all of our staff when we're here. We appreciate it. And in the Child Nutrition Department too, because they were the ones we audited this year. We appreciate everyone's cooperation.
Thank you, Ms. Kirkham. I bet we have a couple of questions at least. Mr. Jackson?
I'm happy to go last.
Go first.
Okay. If we take a look at the MD&A, which is just scintillating reading, page 14 or page 88 of our board book, we have the term deferred outflows of resources. We also have deferred inflows. What does that term mean?
What the term means is it relates to items that show up as reducing our net position in our statement of net position that will not occur till future periods. And so basically they're showing the amount that will not happen till later on. And it represents our bond liability related to, well, our refunding liability related to our gain or loss on our bonds, as well as related to our pensions.
Let me just add to that. We're required for reporting purposes, not for, that does not impact our general fund statements, but is recorded and reported in the government-wide statements. We're required to report on the district share of the TRS unfunded liability. And so the deferred outflows includes the amortization over future periods of that unfunded liability. It also includes the amortization of a deferred charge or a gain on refundings as we have those during the course of the year or years. We also report property taxes that are recognized in future periods, and we report on those in the periods that they become available.
And I'm glad you brought up property taxes, because that's probably the easiest concept to understand, because we may well receive payment of property taxes before we actually recognize them as revenue. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. As long as we're on that section of the MDA, our net position decreased by roughly 26.8 million, or a reduction of 20%, but we also saw an increase in the fund balance. So should we be concerned that we had a 20% reduction in our net position?
No, Mr. Jackson, that's a really good question. That really relates to any expenditure that could potentially happen, and it's recognizing every expenditure and every revenue well into the future. And so that's looking, like I said, at things that may never occur. But if you look at the actual fund balance, which is what really is happening, you will see, as we showed in the presentation, we added $25.7 million to fund balance. And that $26 million really equates to the pension liability, or unfunded liability that increased.
It's the increase in the TRS unfunded pension liability during fiscal 2017 over 2016.
Thank you. If we take a look at the general fund budgetary highlights on page 21 or page 95 of the board book, what was the largest single item and the amount that created a difference between the original budget and the final amended budget?
The largest single item, it was 8.5 million, and it related to, we always budget payroll cost in case TEA does not approve our waivers, if we have some waivers. It's just something that we prepare for and have a contingency for. And because we didn't have to request those as many waivers possibly, and also because we did not, TA did not decline those waivers, then we actually have that amount of money that went to fund balance.
So that includes both the waivers granted as well as waivers budgeted that were unused?
Correct.
Correct.
You know, I came to this board as a citizen some 7 years ago, and I asked members of the board, particularly the Rock Group, to approve the legislative concept of granting waivers. When we discussed it in the CLC, the concept was these waivers would be kind of smeared over all the campuses. Do we have any guidelines that say we won't have more than, say, 5 waivers per campus? Have we ever taken a look at that? I know we don't have board policy, but I'm wondering, do we have administrative positions on that, or do we review it? Do we make certain that we don't have too many waivers clustered on one campus?
I would have to defer to Ms. Stewart to answer that question. All right.
Yeah, the basic, and maybe it's my personal guilt showing through, since I asked the board to approve waivers. We all know what the waiver rule is, but it is, serendipity happens, so you can have one campus that could need 7 or 8 waivers just on that one campus. And have we ever taken a look at what we think is the maximum number of waivers that we should permit at one campus? So even though they may qualify, do we ever take a look and say, oh, well, that's too many waivers for one campus?
Well,
And the other part of the question is, should we?
you know, it changes every year. It depends on our projected student enrollment, our actual enrollment, looking at our budget. So just to say that there's going to be a standard, I'm not sure that we should do that. However, when we allocate staffing, we feel that it's in a manageable amount. So curriculum is involved, leadership is involved. So we believe that those class size ratios are appropriate. And so no, we would not have where, it's not about the number of waivers at a campus, it's really about the particular number of students in the classroom. So we would never say that we will have 35 kids in a kindergarten class. So as opposed to the whole school, it's really about the individual classroom. Did I answer your question?
More or less.
Okay.
The other part of it that I did not get a direct answer to, but I think you answered it indirectly. We do look to make certain that the class sizes over the overall campus, y'all determine those to be manageable and appropriate for that campus, even if it winds up to be 7 or 8 waivers being requested for one campus.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Big picture, when we look at our student-teacher ratio for a campus, it is below generally the 22-to-1 when you look at all of the teaching staff per student. So most of those classes that might be 23 students per class, and we would have to ask for a waiver, throughout the day, those students are probably in small group pull-out opportunities, and those teachers are part of that campus teacher ratio. So they may not all be homeroom teachers, but they are teachers that's supporting giving instructional support to the students. And that's not including the instructional support that those same students receive from central office. So big picture, if you took all of the teacher allocations for campus and you looked at the number of students, that ratio is relatively small. But because we do some different kind of staffings with small group, our pre-K, looking at our bilingual, so that those numbers are supportive of the curriculum, you may see that those classes might be 23, 24, and then there's some discretion in there. Some of those campuses have one or two additional allocations where they may choose to have a class at 15 because that's a struggling area, and then another class will be 23.
Good, I like that answer much better, thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, we've talked about pension liabilities ever since GASB came out with their new rule, and the numbers are significant. And I know, Stuart, both you as well as Karen have touched on pension liabilities, but let's go back and take a look at it one more time. If we take a look at page 68 of the report or page 142 of the board book, once again, we talk about deferred outflows of resources, deferred inflows of resources by source. If you note that the net difference between projected and actual earnings on pension plan investments was $60 million, that's a big number. So since it's a little difficult to figure out, you know, are deferred inflows of resources or deferred outflows of resources, is that good or bad? What does that 60 million mean?
Well, and that 60 million, just so you know, is a cumulative number. And so the amount that it changed from last year was 8.2 million. And basically, it's just looking at the district's proportionate share as things change. So there's a lot of stuff that could affect that. It could affect if, let's just say a district went way down you know, in their amount. Well, it changes the whole proportions there. It also is reflected of any type of losses that have occurred maybe in the program. And they said that part of what, I talked to actually TRS today, and part of what is reflected there is back to some losses that they defer back from 2008, if you remember the downturn. And so they project those forward, and it's a cumulative amount. But that's just, it's a actuarial determined amount, and that is done by the actuaries with TRS.
So back to the question for the 8 million, did that have a negative impact or a positive impact on how we record our pension liability?
It actually increased our pension unfunded portion, our proportionate share of the unfunded liability.
And since part of it related to a downturn that was deferred going forth, and we've talked about this, do we have any concern that there are other hidden liabilities waiting to explode in the future? Because obviously TRS knew back in 2008 that they had this thing that they were pushing forward.
No, and actually, TRS, we've been in talking with them today. They had a very good year in 2017 that has actually helped offset that loss. So they are real pleased with that because they already have their results as from 2017 because their fiscal year ends in August. Also, TRS has been working real hard to reduce that unfunded liability. That is why employees have been having to give a larger contribution. It was over, I think, was it a 4-year period? Or a 3-year period, but the employer contribution amount kept going up to help that unfunded liability. So they've been working towards that for a while.
Well, that was a three-pronged approach to reduce the unfunded liability. The employees kicked in a little bit more, the state kicked in some more, and then the employer, the school districts also increased their contributions. So again, a three-pronged approach to be able to bring in additional contributions to reduce the unfunded liability.
And so and as Stuart points out, I never asked the question that I really mean to ask, so I'll try and be a little more specific in this regard. So I was asking two questions. One, what was the financial statement impact? And then two, on behalf of those who are in TRS, in that pension, is that healthier than it was a year ago? And let me put words in your mouth and see if you agree. It does appear as if it's healthier now than it was a year ago. Is that a good assumption?
That's an accurate statement, yes.
Yes.
And there was no impact to the financial statements other than reporting the liability in the footnotes of the financial statements, as well as the government-wide financials.
Following up,
We're not recording any liability. We're not recording an expense on the district's financial statements for that.
understood. Following up on what you said, Karen, and I want to repeat it because I think it's significant. Generally, in the corporate world, if you have a pension, it is your responsibility to determine that the assumptions used by the actuary are reasonable and appropriate. However, this is a little different. So who sets the actuarial assumptions? Because if you take a look, they assume an 8% rate of return that is embedded in it. So this year that's low because the rate of return is much higher. But in the past handful of years, it hasn't hit 8%. So do we pick the 8%? Are we responsible for it, or does somebody else pick it?
The actuary that TRS utilizes actually comes up with that amount. And they look at that based over both the different averages, a 5-year average and a 10-year average, to determine what is reasonable and what has been occurring. In fact, the 10-year average that's reported in TRS's report is at the 8%.
But once again, back to the question, unlike the corporate world, we have nothing to do with the selection of that rate of return,
Correct.
and we really can't impact it. So whether we agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. We merely have to take their numbers and record it.
That is correct.
Excellent. I would remind everybody there is sensitivity analysis that's included in the footnote, and those numbers are rather large. But that concludes my questions and observations. Thank you. Excellent report. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Any other questions? Would we like to keep that on the non-consent agenda for Monday?
I would, please.
Okay, let's do that. Now, are we going to do something, I think you probably talked about both C and D. Am I wrong on that, Mr. Snow?
C and D were presented, is it C and D?
Yeah.
Are presented together.
Right, and I hadn't read D, but that is the auditor's report
Yes.
on the single audit, single audit. So we've covered both of those, and we're not going to put either of those on consensus. Okay, great. That brings us to E. The board will consider a resolution casting its ballot for its choice of a nominee to serve on the Board of Directors of the Harris County Appraisal District for a term commencing on January 1st, 2018, and extending through December 31st, 2019. Any questions on this item?
We only have one person here. Do we know anything about him?
I think
I
he's
didn't-
been currently on the appraisal district representing our school districts.
Stuart can
Yes.
give you more details, but it's Pete Pappy, who is actually the CFO at
Deer
Deer Park, and also a school board member
School
in
board
Goose
member
Creek.
at Goose Creek.
Goose Creek.
Mr. Poppy currently serves on the board at HCAD, and he's finishing up his first 2-year term, and has been nominated to serve another 2-year term. He was the only nominee, by the way, by the other school districts in Harris County other than Houston ISD. So he would represent all Harris County school districts except for Houston ISD, which Houston ISD board appoints their representative to that HCAD board.
And I'll just add to that, Stuart, that he is serving on the board for Go Public Gulf Coast as our treasurer.
Okay.
And my dealings with him are, he's awesome. So he's a good choice.
I think included a resume, his resume with the board packet. If I didn't, I intended to, and I apologize if I didn't.
I didn't see it.
We can get that out
Yeah.
before Monday.
So do we want to wait to, do we not? Yeah, well, that will be separate and will not be on the consent agenda. I want to make sure that there are no other questions on that. Okay. All right. F, the board will consider approving on second reading additions, revisions, or deletions to district policies. 1, GE local relations with parent organizations. It's a revision. Any questions on that item?
Just a quick question. Marnie, back when I was on the band booster board, our drums, drum kits wore out before the time period came up, so we parents all pitched in for money to buy new drums for the band. And I seem to recall that purchase did not go through the school district. It was bought independently, and there was much discussion that we had to sign documents that gave that drum equipment to the school district. So does this kind of address that type of situation?
I just realized this one on. Yes, trying to address what Teresa and I talked about, fixed assets. So, sorry. And equipment. Sorry, I'm dropping things over here.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, so that exact situation is what we're trying to address.
And any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Can that go on consensus? Very good. That moves us to G. The board will consider approving CareDocs, an electronic information management system of health services data that is currently recorded in eSchool Plus. Any questions on that item? May that move to consensus?
Yeah, but
You do have a
could you,
question?
no, I just for everybody that's listening, can you kind of give us a little brief overview of what this is?
I can, and then we've got Bevan Gordon, our Director of Health Services, that she can add to that as needed. And we actually have representatives from CareDocs here as well, so. So you tell me you'd rather have her come up and? No. Come on up. Come on up, Bevan. Why don't you give a quick just overview of what this does? The information that you received, board, is kind of a good layout of what the comparison is between CareDocs and what we currently have. And the bottom line is just to try to make this more efficient for our nurses. You see a comparison of the features available currently with eSchool Plus, and then how that compares to CareDocs, such as even things such as the daily log entries, the health care provider orders from the doctor, some things that CareDocs will allow us to do that we currently cannot do with eSchool Plus. We also have our Chief Technology Officer, Frankie Jackson, and her team. They've been working with Ms. Gordon and CareDocs on this just to ensure that our system can indeed do this, and it is going to assist the efficiency that we have for our nurses. Parent portal, many different things associated where the parents can also upload medical records and documentation, and then they have access to those. For example, those can be transferable if I move to another campus or I go to summer school during the summer. The immunization records are there for us to easily access as employees and also as parents.
That's a great summary. So the eSchool component, where we currently record all of our health services data, is kind of a part of eSchool that was added on as a feature for nurses and for health services, but really not made for nurses. CareDocs is specifically made for nurses, so we can do things like add templates for specific types of nurse visits so that nurses are sure to have a standard assessment for every visit. So for example, if we have a head injury, we can have a template inside CareDocs to kind of guide a nurse's assessment and documentation. Lots of other current features, including the parent portal, so being able to communicate with parents real time instead of a lot of handwritten letters, which is what we're doing now. Immunizations, asking for immunizations can all be done through CareDocs. Lots of different things that nurses are currently tracking by hand, like medication numbers. There's automatic counts inside CareDocs. So lots of things to help make nurses much more efficient in their jobs.
As far as the parent portal goes, and for parents that don't have computer capabilities, you're still keeping a written dialogue and or diary and whatever you want to call it that you furnish them, right? Is that what you do?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we want that to be a separate item, or do we want it to be on consensus? Everyone agree to consensus? Great. That'll be on consensus. Thank you, Ms. Gordon. That brings us to H. The board will consider approving the campus and district performance objectives for the 2017-18 campus and district improvement plans. And I know we don't have a report on this, but I asked Dr. Macias if she could just give us a brief, very brief overview of how these plans are created and how they line up with our board objectives.
Ms. Mongoya, actually, it all starts with you, the board, and with the goals that you have established for the district. And then from there, all of the goals and the information is shared with not only the campuses, but the district staff as well. And at the campus level, they begin looking at all of their data to see where they need to make improvement and project the improvement that again lines up with the goals that the board has established.
Thank you so much, Dr. Macias. I think it's important that we realize that those plans are made and that they flow all the way down to the campuses. And I think that's probably one reason why we have such great success academically here in Cy-Fair. Any questions about those plans? I know that we saw quite a few of them in our board package. I'd say about, 700 pages, 750 pages of them? Any questions? Dr. Ogletree.
Linda, are these campus plans accessible to parents if they wanted to look at their school and what's planned for their academic life?
Yes, the campus plans are actually public information. They're on the, yes, they are.
Any other questions? Would you like this to be a separate item, everyone?
Madam President.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Jackson. Do you have a question?
I do, as a matter of fact.
Okay, great.
You know, these plans are always found on the website, and all you have to do is you go to the individual school and you look at ratings, and when you click on it, it takes you to the actual CIPs. I always tend to read the CIP before every school visit. When I did it this year, I realized that in 2017, 2018, we have a boilerplate for case criteria, but I seem to recall that perhaps the state of Texas, in their wisdom, decided that we did not need to keep a case criteria to be used in coming up with the A through F. And perhaps, Linda, you even told us that we weren't doing case for the coming year. So we have it on the website, but I seem to recall that perhaps we don't have it. So what's the answer? Help me out here.
Actually, what you shared is, what you remembered is correct. It is on the website right now. We're getting ready to pull it down, but the case is basically gone now. You may recall that the 83rd legislative session created the case back in 2013, I believe, and that stands for Community and Student Engagement. And so they created it and created basically two accountability systems. One, the STAR accountability, and the other one, the case. And then the 84th session came in and said, no, we'd like to put everything together and have it be part of the STAR accountability system. But as they were getting ready to implement that, the 85th legislative session came in and said, no, we're going to do away with it completely. So it's gone, and you won't see it again, and it won't be reported again.
Now, a follow-up question on that. So if you take a look at 2017-18, there are three different factors on there. One has to do, what are we doing, and it's my language, not yours, but basically, what are we doing about reducing the dropout rate? What are we doing to enhance digital learning opportunities? And the third one is, what are we doing to enhance parent and community engagement? So even though we don't report these, do we still address all three of those in our DIP?
Our DIP does address pretty much everything that you shared. Certainly, we're looking at engagement of our students in just extracurricular activities, because we know that if they're engaged, they're going to be coming to school. And that's engagement in anything, whether it's clubs or sports or the fine arts, in anything. So we certainly look at growing our numbers, especially in the fine arts area. We certainly look at that. As far as a parent involvement, that is one of the criteria, especially for the Title I campuses. That is a component of it, so they have to continuously be looking at that.
Excellent, thank you. So even though the state of Texas doesn't care, we still care.
That's absolutely true.
You know, if we take a look at the mathematics section, there is one particular sentence in there. We model and expect students to use the four-step problem-solving process with all math problems. I certainly remember there was a little bit of angst in this area, but I have not heard that angst being expressed by parents this year. Is it still out there, and it's just not percolating up to our level, or is it being addressed?
It's more of a critical thinking process, Mr. Jackson, and it's used as a four-step process. It's used as a three-step process. It's used a little differently from campus to campus, but the bottom line, what's common among all of them, is that it is a critical thinking component.
When you take a look at the technology, and I recall, and Bob, you can appreciate this, back when I had hair, and that was a long time ago, I conducted installation reviews, and I would always, standard question is it air-cooled, water-cooled? Do you have elevated floors? What are you doing to protect your equipment? How are you venting the excess heat? We're in the process of undertaking the largest technological installation for an educational facility in the history of the United States. Certainly, this has to be a concern, even though we don't have what I knew as 370s, or now show up as much smaller devices. But do we address this?
Well, I'm going to ask Frankie Jackson to come up, and while she's coming up, I'll start, I guess, with that. As you know, the 2014 bond authorization included $90 million for a gutting and redesigning and redeveloping our total district-wide infrastructure for technology. And in the great planning that Frankie and her team put together in developing that technology program, they knew that when they began installing all of this brand new equipment, and a lot of it in each of the schools and each of the auxiliary and auxiliary buildings in the ISC, they knew that they were going to have to redesign the network closets to be able to do that. And so one of the major projects of that 2014 technology program was a redesign of all of those network closets, and to make sure that our air conditioning was adequate to be able to cool that equipment that was being installed in that. So with that, I'm going to ask Frankie to do that, to answer that question.
First of all, Mr. Jackson, thank you for bringing up the priority and placing emphasis on the need to assure that our network closets are up to par. In designing the 2014 bond, we allocated funds for air conditioning and power upgrades. We also had a refresh of our data centers where we have raised flooring. But throughout our district and every campus and every school and facility, we have a myriad of mini network closets. For example, Bridgeland has 22. You'll probably remember visiting that campus and how they're stacked one right on top of the other. For the campuses that we have gone back and renovated and overhauled, we first started with the high schools and on down to the middle schools. And so, for example, in the secondary schools total, we spent over $5 million in those network closets for a total of over 195 closets. So there was a significant amount of effort. It actually took 2 years. The board had approved on 2 different iterations funding approvals for those, and so we appreciate that very much. I think with this district improvement plan for this year, we're focused on assuring that we continue to address the upgrades in the network closets for the elementary schools, and also include upgrades as we go forth with the renovation projects. For example, this summer, when we went through our renovation, we went back through the closets, made sure that we had adequate raised network racks, cooling, so that they would run at their optimum performance, because we've spent also a lot of bond funds on network electronics, and so keeping them within the specifications is a huge priority for us.
Excellent. And thank you for a very thorough answer.
The other thing I'd just like to say is that, it's not just a one-time deal. It is a regular review of the closets. And so we have Jennifer Miller, our Director of Technology Services and Performance Excellence. And one of the things that we've instituted for our technicians, these are the staff members that are working at the campuses, is to conduct regular, we key off the term PAR, Preventative Action Report, so that regularly they're checking the closets, assuring that they're clean, assuring that they're cool, they're up to par, and that they're not being used for storage space, because space is in high demand. And so if there's a place to put water and other supplies, sometimes we'll find them tucked in there. So we're really proud of that. So it's not just a one-time deal. It is a regular visiting and assurance that the closets are kept in pristine order.
And thank you for highlighting that. Not only do we have a tremendous amount of money tied up in the closets, but that really runs the entire system.
Absolutely. And thank you for recognizing that. Yes.
Thank you. I guess I'm back to you, Linda. Beautiful coat you have on tonight. Family and community involvement. For years, we've had a program of teaching computer skills and English to parents, but I did not see that listed in this area. Does that mean we've canceled this program, or is it merely not large enough to float up to the surface?
Mr. Jackson, let me check on that one. I'm not sure if we've had it every year, and I'm not sure if we started that with a delay of the school year, but I will check on that and have an answer for you.
Thank you. And then there was one acronym that I'm not certain I understand, but I think Joel probably does. It's HSJN. We want to have an increase in HSJN participants. So is that the program you started, that is High School Journalism Network?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions? I assume we want that to be separate and vote on that on Monday. The board will consider approving construction proposals and contracts paid from bond funds to the recommended contractors and authorizes superintendent or designee to execute all necessary documents related to such contracts as follows. 1, 2017 renovations to Bang, Emmett, and Hamilton Elementary Schools, and 2, 2017 Berry Center renovations. Any questions on those items? Mr. Jackson?
Roy, of these 3 campuses, are any of these Title I campuses?
Only one of those 3 campuses is Title I. I'm sorry, 2 of the campuses are Title I, which is Bang and Emmett Elementary School.
The reason why I asked the question is we just had an election and there were comments made suggesting that we did not remember to bring in our Title I campuses up to standard. But I think we're spending $19 million and probably 2/3 of it is going to Title I campuses. So I think that says we continue to renovate irrespective, as Dr. Henry likes to say, irrespective of zip code. I know I toured Bain just 2 weeks ago, and it looks every bit as good, and maybe I like it better than our brand new two elementary schools. As my colleague Bob will remind me, spot inflation hits the oil and gas industry by the steel folks very easily. My former next-door neighbor, Will Holder, who's president of Trendmaker, identified that spot inflation hits residential construction as well. Where do we stand on spot inflation for school construction and renovation? I know there's a concern that it was robust, particularly in cement. So where do we stand? Is it continuing to go up? Has it abated?
At this time, we're seeing a stabilization in the increasing construction costs, and in fact, with the bid that y'all is before you for consideration, actually came in well below our projected cost for the project over 3 campuses. So on the last several proposals, we're seeing stabilization. We're not seeing any large jumps in our pricing, and if you recall, in our bond program, we were only able to utilize 2 years of inflation over the 6-year program. So I would be expecting, because of a general inflation, that we would be, at or in some cases over projected costs on some projects. We're not seeing that right now. So we're actually seeing the stabilization and being able to bring these projects in well under our projected costs that we had included in our 2014 authorization.
That's good news, but of course, as we all know, there were a host of bond issues that were approved, and that means that's going to create a supply and demand issue as it relates to construction.
One thing I want to point out is the way we've tried to structure our program and the way we sell our bonds in the bond sale that's going to be funded fairly soon this month. We included the architectural fees for our Phase 5 project. And so we're in the process, once we get those revenues, we'll start the design phase of our Phase 5 as we bring forward to you over the next several months our construction contracts for our Phase 4 projects. And so that gives us an opportunity to get ahead of all the other school districts in terms of where their programs are, and especially the bond programs that passed this past week in the elections. It'll take them some time to get those projects started, designed, and on the streets for proposals. So we believe the system we have in place is really putting us in the best possible position to maximize the dollars we have and reduce the cost to our taxpayers.
Let me add to that also in terms of the timing of when we go to market and sell bonds. You've noticed that we've historically over the last several years have gone to the market in November to sell our bonds, and I do that for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is that many of the school districts' bond elections occur in November, and I want to be able to be out front before those elections, because once those elections hit and are approved, then they will begin to work on selling those bonds within the next couple of months after that. But I want to be able to get into the market prior to those elections because to take advantage of more demand and less supply of the municipal bonds that are in the market at the time.
Good, thorough answers. Thank you. A Harvey question. So we're looking to spend $19 million to renovate, significant renovations on 3 campuses. Are any of those campuses in a 100-year or 500-year floodplain?
Those 3 campuses are not in either one. Over at Bang Elementary School, the street in front of the school is actually part of a 500-year floodplain, but our property is not either in the 100 or 500 year on these 3 campuses.
The Houston Chronicle this past week noted that a school district here in Harris County had actually built 6 schools in what's known as a flood pool, which is a little different than either a 100 or a 500-year floodplain. So are any of these 3 campuses in a flood pool?
Not that we're aware of at all.
And then a follow-up. Don Ryan and I visited with Judge Emmett, and he indicated that significant revisions were going to happen to the mapping. I presume you're going to be following that as well?
Absolutely. We'll keep a close watch and work with our civil engineers on that as those maps are updated, and then they usually forward a copy of the proposed remapping, and then we can determine what impact that has to our district. And then in turn, we'd be working with our risk management department and financial services office in terms of our insurance coverage if those maps get approved and modified.
Very good, thank you. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Anyone else? Would you prefer that be on consensus or non-consensus? Non-consensus because the amount? Okay. The board will consider approving and authorizing the superintendent or designee to enter into the miscellaneous professional service contracts related to the following projects. 1, 2017 renovations to Bang, Emmett, and Hamilton elementary schools. Any questions on that item? No? I would assume that could be on consent. Is that all right, or do you want it to be? Okay. All right, great. All right, I think that brings us to the end of.
Did you put that on consensus?
No, yes, consensus, the last item.
Well, the only reason I say that is you really need to approve
One before the other.
J.
All right, then
That
they'll
is
both
correct.
have to be on
Both
non-consensus.
non-consent.
All right. Okay. We are going to have our superintendent's briefing on Monday. There's no need for a closed session, so it looks like we're done for tonight. Thank you very much for all of those that are here tonight and watching on TV, and we'll see everyone Monday night.